Okay, everybody, I'm on. I do have the clock already going because I knew I was running behind a little bit. Let me see. I need to get a message put into my chat box. Spelled that wrong. There we go. Hello, everyone. This is Venus Brown, and I am back for another live reading of Margaret Atwood's book, The Testaments, spin-off of The Handmaid's Tale. We are well into the book now, a little bit past halfway mark, I think. I don't know for sure, though. It looks like halfway through the parts, but not necessarily halfway through the pages. It's actually more than halfway through the pages because I just looked up. It's 373 pages, and we're on like page 274. Actually, I better check that because I thought I knew the number, but apparently I forgot it. It's 257. So we're on page 257, and there's 373 total pages in the book. So anyway, let's see. We are going to be starting the part 18 called Reading Room. This is where the newly established aunts are going to start to learn to read. So I mean, that's not all that they're doing, but that is the main thing that the reading room is for. They're learning to read, they're learning to edit the books, they're seeing how well they progress in their reading, things like that. Okay. All right. Um, by the way, anybody who is waiting for my season finale of the Testaments TV series, I really wanted to get it done early. Unfortunately, I had some problems. I did some editing in the color page for the full video. And usually what I do is I put one filter on it that filters out the background, and then I save that. I basically render that filtered image in place, so it's saved as a matte. It just uses up less resources and stuff, which I did that, but I also put other masks on top of the image that goes on top of the mask or the matte, and it is really bogging down my system. Everything is taking so much longer, and the filters that I had put on there, the masks that I put on there, did not work right. So I have been doing all kinds of stuff to try to fix what I did, and it's taking forever. I finally got it done though. I do have the video done. I have it saved. It works correctly. So I should be able to put it up soon. I'm doing this first. Then I will work on that. I still have to get a timeline done of where I have spoilers and stuff in there. Plus, I did a lot of talking at the beginning and end. Well, especially the beginning. So I'm going to be putting some stuff into the timeline so that you can see like where I am discussing certain major topics. So that way, if you want to jump around, you want to skip some things, it's easier to see where those things are in the timeline so that you can skip them, and it's easier to skip the spoilers if you don't want any spoilers. All right, and I do try to label whether the spoilers are book spoilers or TV show spoilers, and if they're like really big or really little, I'll usually indicate that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with this. We're on chapter 47. Okay, let's go to the correct page. All right. Okay, so we start in part 18, the reading room. And chapter 47, transcript of witness testimony 369A. Becca and I first saw Jade at the Thanksgiving held to welcome back the returning Pearl girls and their converts. She was a tall girl, somewhat awkward, and kept gazing around her in a direct way that verged on being too bold. Already I had a feeling that she would not find Ardua Hall an easy fit, not to mention Gilead itself. But I did not think much more about her because I was caught up in the beautiful ceremony. Soon that would be us, I thought. Becca and I were completing our training as supplicants. We were almost ready to become full aunts. Very soon we would receive the silver pearl girls' dresses, so much prettier than our habitual brown. We would inherit the strings of pearls. We would set out on our mission. We would each bring back a converted pearl. For my first few years at Ardua Hall, I'd been entranced by the prospect. I was still a full and true believer, if not in everything about Gilead, at least in the unselfish service of the ants. But now I was not so sure. We did not see Jade again until the next day, like all the new pearls. She'd attended an all-night vigil in the chapel, engaged in silent meditation and prayer. Then she would have exchanged her silver dress for the brown one we all wore. Not that she was destined to become an aunt. The recently arrived pearls were observed carefully before being assigned as potential wives or econo-wives, or supplicants, or, in some unhappy cases, handmaids. But while among us, they dressed like us, with the addition of a large imitation pearl brooch in the shape of a new moon. Jade's introduction to the ways of Gilead was somewhat harsh, as the next day she was present at a persecution. It may have been a shock to her to witness two men being literally ripped apart by handmaids. It can be shocking even to me, although I've seen it many times over the course of the years. The handmaids are usually so subdued, and the display of so much rage on their part can be alarming. The founder aunts devised these rules. Becca and I would have opted for a less extreme method. One of those eliminated at the persecution was Dr. Grove, Becca's erstwhile dentist father, who'd been condemned for raping Aunt Elizabeth, or almost raping her. Considering my own experience with him, I didn't much care which. I am sorry to say, I was glad he was being punished. Becca took it very differently. Dr. Grove had treated her shamefully when she was a child, and I couldn't excuse that, though she herself was willing to. She was a more charitable person than I was. I admired her in that, but I could not emulate her. When Dr. Grove was torn apart at the persecution, Becca fainted. Some of the aunts put this reaction down to filial love. Dr. Grove was a wicked man, but he was still a man, and a high-status man. He was also a father to whom respect was due by an obedient daughter. However, I knew otherwise. Becca felt responsible for his death. She believed that she should never have told me about his crimes. I assured her that I hadn't shared her confidences with anyone, and she said she trusted me, but Aunt Lydia must have found out somehow. It was how the aunts got their power, by finding things out. Things that should never be talked about. Becca and I had returned from the persecution. I'd made her a cup of tea and suggested she should lie down. She was still pale. But she'd said that she'd controlled her feelings and would be fine. We were engaged in our evening Bible readings when there was a knock at the door. We were surprised to find Aunt Lydia standing outside. With her was the new Pearl girl, Jade. Aunt Victoria, Aunt Immortelle, you have been chosen for a very special duty, she said. Our newest Pearl, Jade, has been assigned to you. She will sleep in the third bedroom, which I understand is vacant. Your task will be to help her in every way possible and instruct her in the details of our life of service here in Gilead. Do you have enough sheets and towels? If not, I will arrange for some. Yes, Aunt Lydia said. Yes, Aunt Lydia, praise be, I said. Becca echoed me. Jade smiled at us, a smile that managed to be both tremulous and stubborn. She was not like the average new convert from abroad. These were likely to be either abject or filled with zeal. Welcome, I said to Jade. Please come in. Okay, she said. She crossed our threshold. My heart fell. I already knew that the already placid life Becca and I had been leading at Ardua Hall for the past 9 years was at an end. Change had come. but I did not yet grasp how wrenching that change would be. So this was something I was thinking about when I read this the second time, um, because it's been a long time since I've read this, that she says she's at the point that Jade gets there, that baby Nicole is there in their presence, is actually 9 years after she got to Ardua Hall. And one of the things that I have not gone back to establish in my mind is the comment that these books start 15 years after Gilead or something like that. And I've never really established exactly what that 15 years entails, like what the exact starting point and ending point of that 15 years entails. And if it's like 15 years before the point that this is taking place, this 9 years after they've been in Ardua Hall, then that wouldn't have been that long a time. Like it would mean that Becca is getting there. Let me see. I think she said that she got to Ardua Hall when she was 14. And if she was in Ardua Hall for 9 years, that would make her like 23. This was one of the things that I had trouble with, that I found weird. Just like trying to figure out the ages these girls were at various times, and because I was getting everything mixed up. So I was thinking that by the point that she had her period, she was in her young 20s or something like that, but it's actually that she's in Ardua Hall and she's getting ready to do the end of her training to be an aunt. So I had all kinds of stuff mixed up. I think a lot of people probably have that stuff mixed up because we're not exactly clear on the when that 15 years started and stopped, and we're not exactly clear on the timeline in the TV shows. And the timeline in the TV shows is set very differently than the timeline here. But yeah, and I think how old was Daisy when she, or Jade in this case, when she got here? I think 16. So Jade is 16. Agnes is 20 something years old in the book. And for some reason, I thought when I read the book the first time that Daisy had gotten there when they were still in that when they were still in that plum school. I thought she got there then. I thought she was placed with them then. I thought she had been placed with them because she had gotten in trouble multiple times, because she's not ready to be in Gilead, because she is woefully unprepared for the kind of lifestyle that you need to live when you're in Gilead. Yeah. So yeah, I've had all kinds of stuff confused. So I think this could help me get that stuff better set in my head, but I still need to go back to the beginning where they mention that 15 years and find out what the beginning and ending of that 15-year period is, so I can better place that. Anyway, let's continue on. I have said our life was placid, but perhaps that's not the right word. It was at any rate orderly, albeit somewhat monotonous. Our time was filled, but in a strange way it did not seem to pass. I'd been 14 when I'd been admitted as a supplicant, and although I was now grown up, I did not appear to myself to have grown much older. It was the same with Becca. We seemed to be frozen in some way, preserved, as if in ice. The founders and the older aunts had edges to them. They'd been molded in an age before Gilead. They'd had struggles we had been spared, and these struggles had ground off the softness that might once have been there. But we hadn't been forced to undergo such ordeals. We'd been protected. We hadn't needed to deal with the harshness of the world at large. We were the beneficiaries of these sacrifices made by our forebears. We were constantly reminded of this and ordered to be grateful, but it's difficult to be grateful for the absence of an unknown quantity. I'm afraid we did not fully appreciate the extent to which those of Aunt Lydia's generation had been hardened in the fire. They had a ruthlessness about them that we lacked. So this is something that, oh gosh, I think it's kind of deceptive what they're telling these girls. Like all this harshness, this ruthlessness, these rough edges. I think they're presenting it to the girls as if this was something that they attained in the world before Gilead. I don't think that they're actually being fully explained that part of this harshness, part of this ruthlessness, a lot of this ruthlessness was not really the world before Gilead. It was the building of Gilead. It was all the shit that they had to go through in trying to go from the world that they once knew to what Gilead wanted Gilead to be. All the torture, all the fucked up shit, all of that, is what really took off. I am sure they went through shit before Gilead was ever a thing that's going to increase their line and wrinkles, increase their harshness, all of that, increase their, what do you call that word? Being jaded, that kind of thing. But there's something so much more sinister and so much more awful about what going from that world before Gilead to going through the whole transition into Gilead and being part of Gilead and dealing with the awfulness of Gilead is going to do to a person. That's something I don't think that they're understanding. That these ants are not just, they're not just being formed by their past and now having this more protected world. They're being formed by being part of the generation that was tortured, that was trained to let go of the previous world and now engage in this current world that is much harsher, at least for them. These girls are protected in a way that none of the other people were. And I think the fact that they are a younger generation that doesn't remember most of the world before, they're being brought up to believe all this shit and to be completely ignorant of the world outside of Gilead and be completely ignorant of the world before Gilead. So that is where this shelteredness comes from. That is where this protection comes from. Partially because they're in the higher echelons of Gilead, but partially because they were raised full on in Gilead. The time that they were alive before Gilead, they were so young that they don't remember most of it. So it's not going to have such an effect on them. Anyway, let's continue on. Okay, next chapter. Chapter 48. Despite this feeling of time standing still, I had in fact changed. I was no longer the same person I'd been when I'd entered Ardua Hall. Now I was a woman, even if an inexperienced one, than I had been as a child. I'm very glad the aunts let you stay, Becca had said on that first day. She'd turned her shy gaze full upon me. I'm glad too, I said. I always looked up to you at school, not just because of your 3 Marthas and your commander family, she said. You lied less than the others, and you were nice to me. I wasn't all that nice. You were nicer than the rest of them, she said. Aunt Lydia had given permission for me to live in the same residence unit as Becca. Ardua Hall was divided into many apartments. Ours was marked with the letter C and the Ardua Hall motto, Per ardua cum estris. It means, through childbirth, labor, with the female reproductive cycle, Becca said. It means all that? It's in Latin. It sounds better in Latin. I said, what's Latin? Becca said it was a language of long ago that nobody spoke anymore, but people wrote mottos in it. For instance, the motto of everything inside the wall used to be veritas, which was the Latin for truth, but they chiseled the word off and painted over it. How did you find that out, I asked, if the word is gone? In the Hildegard library, she said. It's only for us aunts. What's a library? So remember, at this point, I'm pretty sure this whole chapter, it is 9 years before the point that she meets Daisy, baby Nicole, baby Holly, whatever you want to call her, Jade. 9 years before that. And right after she switched from being in the plum school to now being in the Pearl Girls program. It's where they keep the books. There are rooms and rooms full of them. Are they wicked? I asked. Those books? I imagined all that explosive material packed inside a room. Not those I've been reading. The more dangerous ones are kept in the reading room. You have to get special permission to go in there, but you can read the other books. They let you? I was amazed. You can just go in there and read? If you get permission, except for the reading room. If you did that without permission, there would be a correction down in one of the cellars. Each Ardua Hall apartment had a soundproof cellar, she added, which used to be for things like piano practicing. But now the R cellar was where Aunt Vidala did corrections. Corrections were a kind of punishment for straying beyond the rules. But punishments are done in public, I said, for criminals. You know, the persecutions and hanging people and displaying them on the wall. Yes, I know, said Becca. I wish they wouldn't leave them up so long. The smell gets into our bedrooms. It makes me feel sick. But the corrections in the cellar are different. They're for our own good. Now, let's get you an outfit, and then you can choose your name. Okay, so another thing I was going to mention earlier, but I forgot, is that when I first read this, I thought that they would stay in the silvery colored Pearl Girl outfits as long as they were in training. I had forgotten that they actually go into the brown uniforms, and then they get the Pearl Girl outfits when they go on their missionary work. And the Pearl Girls they retrieve go into the silver outfits. But then when they come back after that ceremony, then they go to the brown outfits, I think. Although they said some of them are filtered out. So like some of them will become econo wives, some of them will become commanders' wives, some of them will become aunts, some of them will become handmaids. That was another thing, is that I thought that most of the girls that got their period would become handmaids on this. Although, actually, I thought it wasn't even talked about. But apparently it was talked about, because they specifically said some of them will be wives, some of them will be Kano wives, and some of them will be handmaids. So, like, there's all kinds of stuff in this book that I completely forgot. I need to burp, but it's not coming. It's like stuck in my chest. Hopefully eventually it will come out. Okay, where was I? Oh. There's a little bit. I think there's still more in there, but I got a little bit out. So, all right, where was I? Okay, I think it's the punishments thing. Yeah, because she already talked about how how the leaving the bodies hanging makes their rooms smell. That's just freaking terrible. Like, you know that they're only allowed to leave them up at a certain amount of time, but I didn't even think of like the amount of stink that it's going to put in the buildings that are right around there. Ugh.
Power it off.
Okay, I'm gonna put my speaker back on because it makes it easier for me to hear if a message comes in. I pushed the wrong button.
Line in mode.
Okay. Okay, so corrections in the cellar are different. They're for our own good. Now, let's get you an outfit and then you can choose your name. There was an approved list of names put together by Aunt Lydia and the senior aunts. Becca said that the names were made for the names of products that women had liked once and would be reassured by. But she herself did not know what those products were. Nobody our age knew, she said. She read the list of names out to me since I could not read. So yeah, because they don't have these products anymore. They're a list of names of a bygone age, basically, that they don't even have access to. So only the names of products that were named after other things they would recognize are even going to be recognizable to them. So like she says, what about Maybelline? She said, that sounds pretty, Aunt Maybelline. And Agnes says, no. I said, it's too frilly. How about Aunt Ivory? Too cold, I said. Here's one, Victoria. I think there was a Queen Victoria. You'd be called Aunt Victoria. Even at the supplicant level, we're allowed the title of aunt. But once we finish our Pearl Girls missionary work in other countries outside Gilead, we'll graduate to full aunts. At the Vidala school, we hadn't been told much about the Pearl Girls. Only that they were courageous and took risks and made sacrifices for Gilead, and we should respect them. We go outside Gilead? Isn't it scary to be that far away? Isn't Gilead really big? It would be like falling out of the world. For surely Gilead had no edges. I think that's because I think Aunt Lydia used to say stuff to them like Gilead has no bounds or knows no bounds or some shit like that. Okay, Gilead is smaller than you think, said Becca. It has other countries around it. I'll show you on the map. I must have looked confused because she smiled. A map is like a picture. We learn to read maps here. Read a picture, I said. How can you do that? Pictures aren't writing. You'll see. I couldn't do it at first either, she smiled again. With you here, I won't feel so alone. So that is something I had been thinking about, is that if Becca goes to Ardua Hall to become an aunt and goes through this aunt training and nobody else is there that she knows, like that's going to be pretty lonely for her. But then Agnes gets brought in. I don't know how many years she had been when Agnes got in there, but that at least is, she has somebody that she knows, that she can relate to, that is with her. All right. What would happen to me after 6 months, I worried. Would I be allowed to stay? It was unnerving to have the aunts looking at me as if inspecting a vegetable. It was hard to direct my gaze at the floor, which was what was required. Any higher, I might be staring at their torsos, which was impolite, or into their eyes, which was presumptuous. It was difficult never to speak unless one of the senior aunts spoke to me first. Obedience, subservience, docility, these were the virtues required. So this is another thing, is that this is, even though they're taught to be a certain way as daughters of Gilead commanders, these are still different different teachings than what they're used to. They're not required to look down all the time. They're not required to give subservience and everything to pretty much everyone in authority. I'm sure they have to do it to some, but now they're in this position where they have to look down at a certain level. They need to be subservient and docile to the aunts, and they're primarily working with the aunts and the other Pearl girls, so different than what they're used to. And then you also have these Pearl girls that were retrieved from outside of Gilead, and then you have them who were brought up in Gilead, so then you have those differences also. Okay, so then there was the reading, which I found frustrating. Maybe I was too old to ever learn it, I thought. Maybe it was like fine embroidery. You had to start young, otherwise you would always be clumsy. But little by little I picked it up. You have a knack, said Becca. You're way better than I was when I began. So, and this is something, I've been in education. I'm previously an educator, but I quit because Florida's teaching system was really irritating me, and I wasn't getting into any permanent full-time teaching positions, which was also very frustrating. And there's a variety of reasons for that I am not going to go into, but anyway, what she's saying about the reading being difficult as she's older and everything, I think part of the issue is that most kids are learning stuff very, very early on. They're not even going to realize it. They are exposed to print. They're exposed to other people reading. They're exposed to parents like reading books to them and stuff. All of that is happening. Plus, parents usually start teaching kids their ABCs, their 1, 2, 3s, all of that stuff fairly early on, before they're ever in school. So even if you don't start school until it's required, so some places it's required at 4 or 5 years old, some places it's not required until 6 or 7 years old. Even if you wait until then, most of the time parents are already teaching you stuff. So you're already slowly picking that stuff up. You're already slowly learning. You're learning language from your parents. One of the things that I was told when I started trying to figure out, like, how do I be a good parent? I read a lot of self-help books and stuff like that. And one of the things that was like, um, as a parent, like start reading to your kids, start speaking to them, having full conversations with them as early as possible. Like even while they're still in your belly, be like when you're driving down the road, you can just like talk about every little thing that you see, or you can talk about news events. When they're little babies, read the freaking newspaper to them, like stuff like that. The more you expose them to language, the easier it is for them to learn. But even if you're not doing all that stuff, little kids are learning shit as they go without even knowing it, just by exposing them to print, just by exposing them to you reading to them, things like that. And then when they get in school, they're learning also. So, so by the time they get into school, it's like they're learning new stuff on top of the stuff that they've already learned. So it's not so hard. It's not so difficult. These girls are in a position where they've basically had all forms of literature, writing, reading, all of that taken away from them when they were like 4 or 5 years old, and never seeing it again until this point that they're in this aunt school. And so then you're talking about really like trying to start from scratch. It, from what I understand, it is harder for adults to learn this stuff. It's harder for an adult to learn a new language that's different from the language that they learned when they were kids, but it's also difficult for them to learn as an adult versus a child. But I think part of it is that they don't have that prior training, that prior experience, that prior knowledge of seeing their parents read stuff to them, and how we read to our children sometimes is actually showing them the book, showing them the words, and tracing our fingers along the lines and stuff like that. They don't have any experience with that. They're being forcibly removed from anything having print and stuff like that, and anybody reading and stuff like that, so much that I think they're really just starting from scratch so much that it is going to be harder. It is going to take longer. And yes, like I said, because they're adults, it's also going to be harder, but partially because they just don't have that exposure. Okay, where was I? I need to find a way to like mark my spot or something. I guess I could do that. So that way when I get done talking about something, I can just start where I left off. Okay, so where was I? I think it was right here. Okay, so the books I was given to learn from were about a boy and a girl called Dick and Jane. And I remember the Dick and Jane books. I think I learned some stuff from Dick and Jane. And even when my kids were growing up, occasionally I would have a Dick and Jane book. But usually it's they have these little teeny books that have numbers 1, 2, 3 or whatever that indicate what level the kid is at. And then you could read through that. That's pretty much where my kids started. So sometimes Dick and Jane books, but more often it was other books that were more interesting to me, interesting to them, or engaging to the stuff that they were good at and that they knew and liked and understood. Anyway, the books were very old, and the pictures had been altered at Ardua Hall. Jane wore long skirts and sleeves, but you could tell from the places where the paint had been applied that her skirt had once been above her knees, and her sleeves had ended above her elbows. Her hair had once been uncovered. The most astonishing thing about these books was that Dick and Jane and baby Sally lived in a house with nothing around it but a white wooden fence, so flimsy and low that anyone at all could climb over it. There were no angels, there were no guardians. Dick and Jane and baby Sally played outside in full view of everyone. Baby Sally could have been abducted by terrorists at any moment and smuggled into Canada, like baby Nicole and the other stolen innocents. Jane's bare knees could have aroused evil urges in any man passing by, despite the fact that everything but her face had been covered over with the paint. Becca said that the painting the pictures in such books was a task that I'd be asked to perform, as it was assigned to the supplicants. She herself had painted a lot of the books. So this is another thing I had been thinking about, is that these books, even though these aunts are allowed to read and everything, like they're still being edited for these aunts in training so that they're not exposed to certain things that are outside of Gilead's realm or whatever, that females aren't allowed access to. So the girls are going to look like Gilead girls and the boys are going to look like Gilead boys and stuff like that. So they're now being exposed to reading and writing that they would never have been allowed to be exposed to as females in Gilead. But they're still editing the books to try to mirror Gilead and to try to prohibit them from seeing certain things that they wouldn't be privy to. Although Becca is going to talk about how later on, if they get good enough and they get to that position, they will be allowed occasionally to see other more heretical type stuff or whatever. But anyway. It wasn't a given that I'd be allowed to stay, she said. Not everyone is suitable for the aunts. Before I'd arrived at Ardua Hall, she'd known 2 girls who'd been accepted, but one of them changed her mind after only 3 months, and her family had taken her back, and the marriage arranged for her had gone ahead after all. What happened to the other one? I said. Something bad, said Becca. Her name was Aunt Lily. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with her at first. Everyone said she was getting along well. But then she was given a correction for talking back. I don't think it was one of the worst corrections. Aunt Vidala can have a mean streak. She says, "Do you like this?" when she does the correction, and there isn't any right answer. But Aunt Lily? She wasn't the same person after that. She wanted to leave Ardua Hall. She said she was not suited for it. And the aunts said that if so, her planned marriage would have to take place. But she didn't want that either. What did she want? I asked. I was suddenly very interested in Aunt Lily. Kind of like how she started getting very interested in her handmaid that was in her household when Paula had a handmaid. Like before that, they were all just made to believe that these handmaids were awful people or whatever. But once there was a handmaid in her household, she started getting very interested in the handmaid and started paying more attention to her and being more observant of her, and even occasionally had the shortest of conversations with her, I think. But yeah. She wanted what did she want? I asked. I was suddenly very interested in Lily. She wanted to live on her own and work on a farm. Aunt Elizabeth and Aunt Vidala said that this was what came of reading too early. She'd picked up the wrong ideas at the Hildegard Library before her mind had been strengthened enough to reject them. And there were a lot of questionable books that should be destroyed. they said she would have to have a more severe correction to help her focus her thoughts. So, like, the girl already has been traumatized by the corrections that she was given. And now they're talking about giving her more corrections for these ideas that she's picked up by the books that she's reading. It's like, so you're going to traumatize her more. You're going to make her worse than she already was. And not only that, she got into trying to be an aunt because she didn't want to get married for whatever reason. And now you're like, okay, we're going to force you to get married. And for some of them, maybe they felt that being an aunt was just so much worse than the idea of getting married that they were okay with it. But for this girl, she was not. She was not okay with it. What was it? I was wondering if my own mind was strong enough and whether I too would be given multiple corrections. It was a month in the cellar by herself, with only bread and water. When she was let out again, she wouldn't speak to anyone, except to say yes and no. Aunt Vidala said she was too weak-minded to be an aunt, and would have to be married after all. So, like, you remember when June, back in the TV series, when June got in trouble and was basically isolated for freaking eons, like, both by Serena and by Aunt Lydia, there were times where she was isolated. And the time with Serena, it, like, really broke her for a while. It messed her up, and she was doing that stuff, only saying yes and no, only doing the prescribed statements and phrases, which was irritating Serena. Like, it's Serena's fault that she's like this. And Serena was irritated about her basically being herself before then. But then after she had enforced this punishment on June, she was upset that she was now just parroting the required phrases, which I thought was kind of ironic and kind of fucked up. But yeah, it did. It fucked her up like that for a while, but she did eventually kind of break out of it and get better. But anyway. The day before she was supposed to leave the hall, she wasn't there at breakfast, and then not at lunch. Nobody knew where she had gone. Aunt Elizabeth and Aunt Vidala said she must have run away, and it was a breach of security, and there was a big search, but they didn't find her. And then the shower water started smelling strange. So they had another search, and this time they opened the rooftop rainwater cistern that we use for the showers, and she was in there. "Oh, that's terrible," I said. Was she... Did someone murder her? The aunt said so at first. Aunt Helena had hysterics, and they even gave permission for some of the eyes to come to the Ardua Hall and inspect it for clues. But there weren't any. Some of us supplicants went up and looked at the cistern. She couldn't have simply fallen in. There's a ladder. Then there's a little door. Excuse me. "Did you see her?" I asked. "It was a closed coffin," said Becca. "But she must have done it on purpose. She had stones in her pockets. That was the rumor. She didn't leave a note. Or if she did, Aunt Vidala tore it up. At the funeral, they said that she died of a brain aneurysm. They wouldn't want it to be known that a supplicant had failed so badly. We all said prayers for her. I'm sure God has forgiven her." "But why did she do it?" I asked. "Did she want to die?" "No one wants to die," said Becca. "But some people don't want to live, in any of the ways that are allowed. And I think Becca here is speaking explicitly from experience. When she was so upset about getting married that she tried to kill herself, that is how she felt. Like, she felt like all the ways that Gilead is giving us options to live are not ways that I want to live. And even in the TV show, you kept hearing her say things like sometimes she wished that that basically that the world would end and all the stars would be extinguished, stuff like that. Like, this girl was suicidal. She wanted to die because all the options that Gilead was saying that she had to live after she leaves plum school were options that she did not want to live in. So again, I'm still saying that whatever it is that they're presenting on the TV show, that she ended up killing her father because she was so madly in love with Agnes that she was willing to do this for her, that there still is some sort of fucking trauma in there that caused this. Like, this is not just something that she loves Agnes so much and that's why she's this way. Like, there's got to be some other fucking trauma there that makes her so upset that about the idea of being married to a man, that she wants to kill herself, that she doesn't want any of her friends to be married, that she doesn't want any of her friends to go through this whole marriage mart shit. Like, there has to be something more there, but they're not talking about it in the show, which does irritate me. I hope they go into it. I hope they don't completely make it about, oh, she's just so distraught because of her not fitting into Gilead because of her sexuality or whatever. I think that is lazy and messed up, but who knows? So far, they're not going that way. Anyway, let's see. Okay, so I think we're at... But why did she do it? No. Because I think she already said that. It was the... some people don't want to live in any of the ways that are allowed. And this is another problem with Gilead. Like I said earlier when they were talking about how these ants have rough edges and stuff like that, and they are much softer and they don't have this or whatever. Like, you're not just talking about people that lived lives before Gilead. You're talking about people that lived lives before Gilead and then had to transition into Gilead and deal with all Gilead's tortures. And some of Gilead's tortures is being so narrow that there is no path in a Gilead life that they want to live through. That's torturous in itself, in my opinion. All right. After I'd mastered the Dick and Jane books, I was given 10 Tales for Young Girls, a book of rhymes by Aunt Vidala. This is one that I remember. Just look at Tirzah, she sits there, with her strands of vagrant hair. See her down the sidewalk stride, head held high and full of pride. See her catch the guardian's glance. Tempt him to sinful circumstance. Never does she change her way. Never does she kneel to pray. Soon she into sin will fall and then be hanging on the wall. So they really just use all this stuff that is natural, that is normal and okay to most people, but in Gilead and in some extremist religious organizations, it's taken as blasphemy, it's taken as heretical, it's taken as ungodly, and that men are just going to be so freaking taken by your arousal that they're not going to be able to control their sexual urges, and these women are going to be just taken into sinful life, and they're going to end up dead because Gilead ain't going to have it. Like, they're taught this shit from the beginning over and over and over again, giving them completely deluded ideas about the way things are, the way nature works, the way their biological reactions are, the way the world is. It's just disturbing. Aunt Vidala's tales were about things girls shouldn't do, and the horrifying things that would happen to them if they did. I realize now that the tales were not very good poetry, and even at the time, I didn't like hearing about these poor girls who made mistakes and were severely punished or even killed. But nevertheless, I was thrilled to be able to read anything at all. One day I was reading the Tirzah story out loud to Becca so she could correct any mistakes that I was making when she said, hold on, I have to remove something. That stupid computer pop-up. Anyway, correct any mistakes I was making when she said, that would never happen to me. What wouldn't, I said. I would never lead any guardians on like that. I would never catch their eyes. I don't even want to look at them, said Becca. Any men. They're horrible, including the Gilead kind of God. Becca, I said, why are you saying that? What do you mean, the Gilead kind?
Power it off.
They want to be God. They want God to be only one thing, she said. They leave things out.
Mode.
It says in the Bible, we're in God's image, male and female both. You'll see when the aunts let you read it. Don't say such things, Becca, I said. Aunt Vidala, she'd think it was heresy. I can say them to you, Agnes, she said. I'd trust you with my life. Don't, I said. I'm not a good person like you. Not like you. In my second month at Ardua Hall, Shunammite paid me a visit. I met her at the Schlafly Cafe. She was wearing the blue dress of an official wife. Agnes, she cried, holding out both hands. I'm so happy to see you. Are you all right? Of course I'm all right, I said. I'm Aunt Victoria now. Would you like some mint tea? It's just that Paula implied that maybe you'd gone, and then there was something wrong. That I'm a lunatic, I said, smiling. I noted that Shunammite was referring to Paula as a familiar friend. Shunammite now outranked her, which must have irked Paula considerably, to have such a young girl promoted above her. I know she thinks that. And by the way, I should congratulate you on your marriage. You're not mad at me, she said, reverting to our old schoolgirl tone. Why would I be mad at you, as you say? Well, I stole your husband. Is that what she thought? That she'd won a competition? How could I deny this without insulting Commander Judd? I received a call to hire service, I said as primly as I could. She giggled. Did you really? Well, I received a call to a lower one. I have 4 Marthas. I wish you could see my house. I'm sure it's lovely, I said. But you really are all right? Her anxiety on my behalf may have been partly genuine. Doesn't this place wear you down? It's so bleak. I'm fine, I said. I wish you every happiness. Becca's in this dungeon too, isn't she? It's not a dungeon, I said. We share an apartment. Aren't you afraid she'll attack you with the secateurs? Is she still insane? She was never insane, I said. Just unhappy. It's been wonderful to see you, Shunammite, but I must return to my duties. You don't like me any more, she said half seriously. I'm training to be an aunt. I'm not really supposed to like anyone. Okay, so we're on this chapter. Let me go to the live scene for a minute. Okay, so I have not read chapter 49. Not the second time. I started to read just a little bit. I just ran out of time because I was trying to do other things before the live stream started. But so yeah. I wonder if we're gonna get to the more serious stuff with Shunammite. I doubt it. I wonder if we'll learn more about Jade since we're doing the Pearl Girls thing. Although it seems like they're really focusing on the reading room, on them learning to read and stuff. So probably not yet. Well, anyway, I guess it's no time like the present to get back to the reading, and this will be the last chapter for this live stream. So, and I don't plan on talking a bunch about the TV show. I think I got most of that out of my system now. I did talk a little bit about what anything that kind of parallels or goes along with some of the stuff in the TV show or is a contradiction to what's in the TV show, a lot of times I will talk about. So that's that. But I'm not going to do like I did last time and have a whole separate section where I discuss the series, because, yeah, that's not something that I want to do regularly. I mean, I could consider it, but it's just not something that I want to regularly do. It's something, if I really feel like there's other stuff that I want to get out, or there's something that I find really interesting that I want to talk about, sometimes I'll do a little extra thing, a little extra section. But for the most part, I'll do the reading, and occasionally I will compare, contrast, or whatever, talk about things on my mind when it comes to the differences and the similarities between the books and the TV show, or even between the two different books, Handmaid's Tale and the Testaments. Okay, anyway, let's go back to the reading scene. Chapter 49. My reading abilities progressed slowly and with many stumbles. Becca helped me a lot. We used Bible verses to practice from the approved selection that was available to supplicants. With my very own eyes, I was able to read portions of Scripture that I had until then only heard. Becca helped me find the passage that I'd thought of so often at the time Tabitha died. For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night, thou carriest me away as with a flood. They are as asleep. In the morning they are like grass, which groweth up. In the morning it flourisheth and groweth up. In the evening it is cut down and withereth. Laboriously I spelled out the words. They seemed different when they were on the page, not flowing and sonorous, as I had recited them in my head, but flatter, drier. Becca said that the spelling was not reading. Reading, she said, was when you could hear the words as if they were a song. Maybe I won't ever get it right, I said. You will, said Becca. Let's try reading some real songs. She went to the library, I wasn't allowed in there as yet, and brought back one of our XVlll hymn books. In it was the childhood nighttime song that Tabitha used to sing to me in her voice like silver bells. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord. See, this is a poem. It's not a song, but I guess you could try to sing it. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. I sang it to Becca, and then after a while I was able to read it to her. That's so hopeful, she said. I would like to think that there are two angels always waiting to fly away with me. And then she said, I never had anyone sing to me at night. You were so lucky. Along with reading, I had to learn to write. That was harder in some ways, though less hard in others. We used drawing ink and straight pens with metal nibs, or sometimes pencils. I depended on what had been recently allocated to XVlll from the storehouses reserved for imports. Writing materials were the prerogative of the commanders and the aunts. Otherwise, they were not generally available in Gilead. Women had no use for them, and most men didn't either, except for reports and inventories. What else would most people be writing about? We'd learned to embroider and paint at the Vidala school, and Becca said that writing was almost the same as that. Each letter was like a picture, or a row of stitching, and it was also like a musical note. You just had to learn how to form the letters, and then how to attach them together, like pearls on a string. She herself had beautiful handwriting. She showed me how, often and with patience. Then, once I could write, however awkwardly, she selected a series of biblical mottos for me to copy. So, what was I thinking about? I know I was thinking about something and I wanted to say it, and now I don't remember. Oh, so Becca was describing how the letters are like a picture and also like notes, and I was thinking about that. Were they teaching the girls with actual music notes when they were teaching them music? Because I know that Agnes said that they were not allowed to have calendars to keep time. That was too close to reading. And I'm wondering if they think that musical notes are different enough from reading that they don't put those same kind of restrictions on them. Anyway, all right, so we're doing this passage that she had selected. Series of biblical mottos for me to copy. And now abideth faith, hope, charity. These three, but the greatest of these is charity. Love is as strange as death. A bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. So that faith, hope, and charity, back in the Handmaid's Tale, even in the book, June had talked about how she had this one pillow in her room. I think it had faith written on it. And she was talking about how she wonders where the other two went, the hope and charity or whatever. And I don't remember for sure, but I thought she might have said that Like one of them was with Serena or something, but she wondered where the third one went. The charity, I think. I always thought it was faith, hope, and love, but whatever. Charity seems a little long to be going on a pillow, but I guess it could just make it smaller or make it span out more. Anyway, where was I? I wrote them over and over by comparing the different written versions of the same sentence. I could see how much I had improved, said I could see how much I had improved, said Becca. I wondered about the words I was writing. Was charity really greater than faith? And did I have either? Was love as strong as death? Whose was the voice that the bird was going to carry? Being able to read and write did not provide the answers to all questions. It led to other questions, and then to others. And this is something that I found, I think both in trying to figure things out, but also in my own path, in my previous faith path. I am no longer a faithful religious person at all, but I used to be a Christian. I used to be a very faithful Christian. I used to be Sunday school teacher, all kinds of stuff. But one of the things is that I definitely found I always was asking questions and I was always wondering things, and the leadership in church never would give me the answers that I sought. So as I got older, I started looking more and more into them, and that is one of the things that I find, that the more you look for answers, the more questions you have. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's great, but it's something that if you are going into trying to understand a thing or understand the answer to a question, and you're expecting it to like satisfy you and you to have less questions after that, I think that you will be sadly mistaken. The more questions you answer, the more questions you will have. The more answers you get, the more questions you will get. The more information you have, the more you will want to know, the more you'll feel like you don't know enough. So even those people that are really, really smart and they've learned so much, often feel that they don't know nearly they don't know nearly enough. I don't know if I'm saying a double negative or what, but it sounds almost like it. Anyway, okay, so being able to read and write did not provide the answers to all questions. It led to other questions and then to others. But that also gives you more and more knowledge and more information. The more you learn, the more you know. And if you know better, you should be able to do better. Anyway, in addition to learning to read, I managed to successfully perform the other tasks assigned to me during those first months. Some of these tasks were not onerous. I enjoyed painting the skirts and the sleeves and the head coverings on the little girls in the Dick and Jane books. And I did not mind working in the kitchen, chopping up turnips and onions for the cooks and washing dishes. Everyone at Ardua Hall had to contribute to the general welfare, and the manual labor was not to be sneered at. No aunt was considered above it, though in practice the supplicants did most of the heavy hauling. But why not? We were younger. Scrubbing the toilets was not enjoyable. However, especially when you had to scrub them again, even when they were perfectly clean the first time, and then again for a third time. Becca had warned me that the aunts would demand this repetition. Excuse me. Okay, that burp finally came out. Like, that was a... I know, you're not here to hear me burp, but it was like stuck in there earlier in my chest, and it was very uncomfortable. So, anyway. It wasn't the state of the toilets, she said. It was a test of obedience. But making us clean a toilet 3 times, that's unreasonable, I said. It's a waste of valuable national resources. I love how she's looking at this. That sounds like something I would think. Toilet cleaner is not a valuable national resource, she said. Not like pregnant women. But unreasonable? Yes, that's why it's a test. They want to see if you'll obey unreasonable demands without complaining. To make the test harder, they would assign the most junior aunt to supervise. To be given stupid orders by someone almost your age is a lot more irritating than having that person be old. I hate this, I said after the 4th week in a row of toilet cleaning. I truly hate Aunt Abby. She's so mean and pompous, and it's a test, Becca reminded me. Like Job being tested by God. Aunt Abby isn't God. She only thinks she is, I said. We must try not to be uncharitable, said Becca. You should pray for your hatred to go away. Just think of it as a flowing out of your nose, like breath. Becca had a lot of these control yourself techniques. I tried to practice them. They worked some of the time. Once I'd passed my 6th month examination and had been accepted as a permanent supplicant, I was allowed into the Hildegard Library. It's hard to describe the feeling this gave me. The first time I passed through its doors, I felt as if a golden key had been given to me. A key that would unlock one secret door after another, revealing to me riches that lay within. Initially, I had access only to the outer room, but after a time, I was given a pass to the reading room. In there, I had my own desk. One of my assigned tasks was to make fair copies of the speeches, or perhaps I should call them sermons, that Aunt Lydia delivered on special occasions. She reused these speeches, but changed them each time, and we needed to incorporate her handwritten notes into a legible typescript. By now, I had learned how to type, although slowly. While I was at my desk, Aunt Lydia would sometimes pass me going through the reading room on her way to her own special room, where she was said to be doing important research that would make Gilead a better place. That was Aunt Lydia's lifetime mission, said the senior aunts. The precious bloodlines genealogical archives kept so meticulously by the senior aunts, the Bibles, the theological discourses, the dangerous works of world literature, all were behind that locked door. We would be granted access only when our minds were sufficiently strengthened. The months and years went by, and Becca and I became close friends and told each other many things about ourselves and our families that we'd never told anyone else. I confessed how much I'd hated my stepmother Paula, although I tried to overcome that feeling. I described the tragic death of our handmaid Crystal and how upset I'd been. And she told me about Dr. Grove and what he'd done. And I told her my own story about him, which upset her on my behalf. We talked about our real mothers and how we wanted to know who they'd been. Perhaps We ought not to have shared so much, but it was very comforting. I wish I had a sister, she said to me one day. And if I did, that person would be you. Ah! Ah! Oh my goodness. Making me all cry, all teary. I was thinking about something with Aunt Lydia. Not with Aunt Lydia, actually. With this training that they're doing of rewriting Lydia's speech. So it is sort of Aunt Lydia. Rewriting Lydia's speeches. And she wants them to write them differently each time and gives them notes or whatever so that she can change it up a little bit. I wonder if this is part of what she's doing with all this documentation. Like, there's a lot of coded language and stuff that they use. I wonder if there's something to it. Something to it to do with her trying to take things down and stuff like that. If there's secret messages in there or something like that. It's just, it made me think of that. The way she talks about how she writes this in a particular font and that she has to change it, that they're tasked with rewriting these things that Aunt Lydia changes out on her speeches each time. Interesting. Anyway, let's see. I am going to go over my schedule with you just before I leave. Because a bunch of this is going to be changing, so we are still doing the live reads until I finish the book. I am thinking about doing another book. I just have to figure out what book it's going to be. I would love to try to keep the books dealing with the stuff that I am doing reactions and discussions to on the channel, but that may not always be available. I do have like stuff with Game of Thrones and Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and House of the Dragon stuff that I could read. Well, I couldn't because I have it all in Audible, which is all audio. So I'd have to see if I can get access to written books, which I'm pretty sure I can't get them free like I did with The Handmaid's Tale and the Testaments. But who knows? Maybe I can. But we'll see. I know I have some actual physical books that I might be able to read. I don't think they're anything to do with any of the stuff that I've done reactions and discussions to, though. So, but anyway, let's get back to my schedule. So we're going to continue on with the Testaments live reads every Sunday and Tuesday. Sundays I usually try to do them around noon. Tuesdays I usually try to start around 2. Sometimes I have other stuff going on, or I have appointments and I might have to change them. And usually I will put in a note on my posts saying what those changes will be, but sometimes I forget, and so then you don't get a notice until afterwards, until after I remember, and I'm like, oh my god, I completely forgot this thing. And yeah, I think I did that last Tuesday, because last Tuesday I forgot that I had an appointment that was going to interfere. I forgot to change the time around and ended up having to just skip it and just said I would just come back to reading on Sunday when Sunday came around. Anyway, let's see. Solo Leveling. I have one more reaction to put out this Friday, and then I will be starting on Tokyo Ghoul Re Part 2. After Tokyo Ghoul Re, I will start on Demon Slayer, I think is what it's called. Demon Slayers. And then after that, I don't know. Okay, and then after... I am putting my last episode, the season finale of Testaments, up this after this. I have to get a timeline schedule up, and then I will put that up. I will post it. After that, I'm going to be transitioning over to House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon doesn't start until June 21st. So, in the meantime, I have 2 trailers that I plan on doing reactions to. And I might do a slightly longer live stream of them also. And a couple of behind the scenes type stuff. And then I will start with House of the Dragon. There is part of the time that House of the Dragon is going to be airing that I will be on vacation, and I may not be able to do content for it. So I plan on doing a discussion and breakdown of the episodes for House of the Dragon. I'm not going to be doing reactions until later on down the road. So I'll do discussion with a breakdown of the episode. But there's going to be, I think, 3 weeks I'm going to be in Ireland and Scotland for a little bit. So during those 3 weeks, I don't know if I'll have access to the show. And if I don't have access, I will have to wait until I come back. If I do have access, I will go ahead and do the discussion and breakdown. I just don't know exactly how long it will take me. Don't know how long it will take me to get the episodes. I remember I was on vacation. I was on vacation during, I think it was House of the Dragon before, when it first started. And it took me a while, but it was playing on HBO in one of the hotels that we were in. So I was able to see it. I wasn't able to do it the same way that I usually do, but I was able to see it, react to it. It just took a long time to edit. Because when I'm on vacation, I am not doing as much of the editing and stuff. I'm not doing as much of the work. So all of it is just slower. It all takes longer. But yeah, Testament reactions will be replaced by House of the Dragon discussion and breakdown, or breakdown and discussion. I haven't decided how I'll label it, but that's basically what it's going to be. A breakdown of the episode and discussion about the episode. And probably discussion about chatter going on the internet, because I like to do that stuff too. And that's about it for now. That's all I got for you for now. I'll see you when I see you. Bye.